welcome back to my channel. I'm Felicity and I'm the author of the Benahar series. My mic is not plugged in, so hopefully the sound is okay. It's on charge. I did film this video last time. I was batch filming and it cut out on this one, the mic cut out. So here I am filming it again because there was zero sound and I'm not into dubbing anything. But back to the topic of this video, which is 5 tips and 1 bonus tip on how to start writing your book. So this video is not about drafting your book, it's how we get to starting to draft your book. So it's everything that comes before it. So my first tip would be for you to decide what type of book that you are going to write. And what I mean is, are you writing a short story? Are you writing a novella? Or are you writing a novel? And the reason why you need to know this is how many words you need to write, how long it's going to be, the length of your story. This isn't necessarily as important if you are self-publishing, but if you are looking to then send off your story to an agent and get it published, traditionally published, you do need to look at the word count. So if that's what you're aiming for, I had a quick look online because I write novels, so I am looking anywhere between 80,000 to 120,000 words per novel or per book that I write in my series. So if you're looking to write a short story or novella, you are looking at anything between 1,000 words for something like a short story. That may go within an anthology. So if you know the type of book that you want to write, then you'll know the word limit that you need to write to. If you're writing a novel, don't worry if you go over that 120,000 word mark. It's giving you a goal to reach in order to be able to plan and write your book. Tip number 2 is, what genre are you going to write in? So this really depends on what you're into, I suppose. Like, you're not going to write a non-fiction book if you're really into fiction. And I don't write a book about science fiction if you hate science fiction, but you know it's popular, so you think that's going to, get you more likes or more followers or make more money. I would always write a genre that you personally love to read, that you're really into. So definitely stick with a genre that you know and love and that you read, because there's nothing worse than trying to write a story that is not in your lane, so to speak, because it will come less easy to you and it may not come at all to you, and then you may end up getting something like writer's block, which means you're going to stare at the page and you're not going to write anything. You might also want to consider, when you're looking at your genre, how specific the genre is. And what I mean by that, if you're going to self-publish like myself on a platform like Amazon, the categories have subcategories, so it narrows down. And when you go to publish your book, you then have to choose categories in order for your book to rank under. And what I mean by that is, say if you picked fiction or science fiction, when you click on it, it gives you some extra categories, and you can ask Amazon to list your book. Books used to be up to 10, but I think it's only 3 now. So I'll show you now what I mean by that. Okay, so if we go into Amazon and we look at, let's just take my book for instance, The Rat, the Wolf and the King's Fall. This is under the Kindle section, and if you scroll down, you'll find here there are categories. So mine is in fantasy, but under it it's also fairy tales, mythology and fantasy adventure. And the way you find these is, if you go into the Kindle store, and on the left hand side here you'll see books, literature and fiction, mythology and folk tales. So these are the categories that fall under literature and fiction. If I go back into books, it comes up with more. And if I try science fiction and fantasy, Comes up with fantasy and science fiction. Click on fantasy, and it has things like fairy tales. It has fantasy again, low fantasy, myths and legends. If I try historical, doesn't really come up with anything. Yeah, if you keep going to the end and the end and the end, it will come up with other ideas for you. So here you go. Under alternative history, you've got colonisation, anthologies and short stories, dystopian, cyberpunk, steampunk, and it can go on and on. So bear that in mind when you pick what genre that you're looking for. Also have a quick look on something like Amazon and Amazon categories, just to check that you are being quite specific to the genre that you're looking to write in. Tip number 3, figure out if you are going to be writing a series or a standalone novel. I wish I'd known this before, but when you write a book, series actually always sell better than a standalone novel. And the reason why that is because when you build a world and you build all these characters and these places within your world, your audience are more likely to invest in it. And it also means that you as an author can actually make more money from it and therefore possibly a living as a writer when you write series. There's a really good free course called Starting From Zero by an Irish author called David Cochran. It's completely free and he talks you through writing a series and how to market a series, and the whole course also takes you through the different marketing platforms and how you can launch each book from your series. It's a really, really good course. So I'm not going to write one myself because why would I when there's this resource out there for you already? So I'll put the link down below, but he's an amazing author and helps lots and lots of people in the industry to publish and market their books. So definitely have a look at that because he's got really good tips and advice on how to market a book series. But again, fine if you just have one book in you, and that's great, but if you can write a series, it's more profitable for you as an author. But it also, for me, I find it helps with my creativity that I've got all these other characters that I can build on and the world keeps growing. And yeah, if you're investing in it, your audience will too. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about writing and publishing a book series in a later video because there's other things that go into it and that you need to consider, especially when it comes to publishing. So that will be in another video. Tip number 4, plot out the places, the characters and the objects within your novel or your book series. So what I mean by that is your story is mainly within your head, but for it to come alive on the paper, you need to, one, set the place of where your book is based. So it may be based in a real life city like London, or if it's fictional like My World of Benaha, then you might want to sit down and sketch out a rough map of where the city is in your world, the layout of that city. This is what I did to help me, and it means I can go back to it if I need to, say, put one character at a certain time in the book in one area of the city and make sure they can get to the other side of the city within a certain amount of time. And just it helps you as well as the reader to visualize where everything is. It's the same from going from plotting a map to plotting a room within a house within your story, or the objects that are within a certain room. It all helps you to visualize as you're writing, and if you've got something to reference as you're writing, then it just helps you with the flow of writing, I find at least. And again, If you know where everything is and if it's in the right place and that object is a certain colour, it stays consistently that colour throughout the book, the curtains in the dining room are the same colour, or the castle is north facing, it might sound a little bit too rigid, but if you know where everything is, then it will come easily to you and you've always got something to refer back to so you don't get lost within your story. So definitely map out all the places, and if you need to, you can shoot off arrows and diagrams from that map with bullet notes for more information on each section of your map or district of your map. Tip number 5, when it comes to your chapters, write them out and do a brief description of each chapter. So you may not write a plan, or you may have already written a book and you've not done a plan before and found that you were stifled in the process. Or if you're new to writing, then what I like to do is just write chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 and so on, and then under each heading I will then write a brief summary of what is going on in each chapter. So for instance, in Ben-Ahar, the Rat, the Wolf and the King's Fall, in chapter 1 I didn't have a title for the chapter at the time. I do that after I've written the book. I just wrote a brief summary. Protagonist is on the boat on the way back from the Far East. She is travelling to Ben-Ahar, the capital city of the Abran Empire, and then bullet pointed what exactly goes on within that chapter, very, very briefly, and how it ends. And then I do that for every chapter. So there's always a start, a middle and an end to each chapter, and the end of the chapter then leads on to the following chapter. So it's not so much a cliffhanger, but it means you can then jump straight into the next chapter to make it flow more easily for you. At least that's how I do it, and that's how I find it works for me. So that's always helpful. And then if you want to name your chapters, just do what I do, and once it's all written, then go back, and when you're doing your edits, then name the chapters. Because if you just sit around trying to come up with a name for the chapter before you've even written it, it's just going to stop you in your tracks. So don't waste time, just keep it very simple, do a brief, and then when you get to drafting your book, you just need to refer back to your brief plan, your chapter plans, and then it will help you start writing. Trust me, it does work. And then my bonus point and my 6th tip is really referring back to what I said about the maps and setting out and the non-naming of your chapters before you finished your first draft. Is the same with characters. If you've got a few characters in mind and you, like me, are building a world for a series and you've not quite got all the names yet and that's holding you back, don't name them. Name them after you have finished writing your draft. Now that might sound ludicrous, but my first book I took longer to write it because I took ages to name the characters, whereas the second book I was like, I'm not going to do this, I'm just going to write a blank every time. I can't think of a character name, but I know who they are. And for instance, there's a character that is introduced in the second book of the series, the Last Sigilor, and I knew who he was, what he looked like, what gang he was a part of, but he had to have a certain trait to his name, and if you've read the book you'll understand that. But I didn't want to faff about because I was in the flow of writing the book, so I would just write a sentence, and if his name came up in it I would just write a dash for where his name went and carried on writing. You can do that, or you could just put Joe Blogs or Jane Doe, and that's all you need to do. And then I used to just circle it and then move on. And then when I came back to editing the draft, then that's when I'd be like, right, today I've got to sit down and I've got to come up with a name for this character. So everything is all about flow. Everything about starting your book is making sure it is planned out well enough and enough that you feel comfortable that you can start writing your draft, and that your draft does not get stalled in the process because you have to then stop and name characters and place names and you forgot what genre you're writing. Hopefully that's not the case. Or you need to remember how many words that you need to write. It's just making sure this is all laid out for you in advance so that you're all prepped and ready to start writing your book. And they are my 5 tips with a 6th bonus point or bonus tip on how you can start writing your book. So I hope those tips have helped you. Let me know if you do any of those, if you've written a book already, or you think any of those tips that I've just given you will help you to stop stalling and start writing your book. And then in the next video, I will probably talk to you about how you can find the time to start drafting your book. You can find the time, and I will give you tips on how to do that, even if it's, so many minutes a day, which sounds ludicrous, but it worked for me and I think it might work for you. So I'll give you some tips on how you can find the time to draft your book. And then after that, I will talk to you a little bit more about writing a book series and the things that you need to think about before you publish. So I hope that's helped. Let me know down in the comments below, and if you've got any other tips and advice for anyone else who's following the channel, please do start a discussion down below as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.